Welcome back to Hot Rod Guy Garage. This can be another episode on 70 Torino, so follow me through the intro, and I'll be back. So guys, you made it through the intro, and here we are. Less than 20 days away from NoName Nationals. I got a car with a clutch ripped out of it, and a bad motor. So what do you do at this point? I don't know either. But really, the only plan I got right now is I've got to get this thing apart. Maybe pull an ace out of my sleeve. Because we're going to make it. One way or another. This car will be at the NoName Nationals. Now, it might not be with the 306 cylinder, but we'll make it. I've got some things in the works. I don't know how everything's going to pan out, but we'll just have to see how it goes throughout the episode. So the big thing is, I got to get the grill out of the car so it don't get broke. I got to get this hood off. I got to get that out of there. So let's see what we get into today, and then I'll be back. So guys, hopefully this will give somebody a reason to at least not give up. I could certainly take another car, and that would be the easy answer. Probably the cheapest answer at this point, but regardless, this car's got to get back running so I can get it out of my shop. So the only thing I know to do at this point is to power through. Might be putting in a slightly less powerful motor at this point, or a greatly less powerful motor at this point. But I don't know. We'll just have to see how things fall out. The big problem is going to be getting a clutch in time. As you can imagine, I'm almost out of money. Well, I am out of money. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. Because what a lot of people don't know, even though this 306 cylinder was kind of a budget build deal, and the 4-speed swap wasn't, I've got probably near $10,000 in this motor and transmission setup. So the 306 cylinder is definitely not going away, I believe, for a small time. But the big thing is, I need to get this grill out because they're super fragile. So let me get doing that, and now I'll be back. It's a little while later. I'm still taking stuff off. The only good thing is I've not really modified anything to keep me from putting anything else in this. I just got to get all this extra stuff off. I'm going to leave the motor as fully dressed as I can. That way nothing really gets misplaced that come off the car. So, big thing is, even though we're in a rush, we don't need to get in a rush. Guys, this right here is why I decided to compression test the motor. I had just drained this the day we went to the track. And it is slap full of nasty. So I knew we had some kind of compression into the crankcase issue when I seen my catch can was all oily on the outside, which means it was blowing out the filter, and it was running down the bottom of the firewall. So this is ultimately why I compression tested it. I'll let that sit there like that for a little while. Yeah, maybe not. So, as discouraged as I was Tuesday night, I took the rest of the week to come up with a plan, worked on the 65 Mustang a little bit. So, It's hot. I gotta get this motor out here today, or I can get the car ready for what we're gonna put in it, or whatever I decide to put in it. So let's keep working. Well, it sure is hot today. Now I'm gonna keep plugging along. I about got the motor ready to come out. All I got left is the motor mount bolts, and it can set out. Hopefully, my buddy will actually show up at the shop today. He told me he'd be here, and we're almost noon at this point, and I've not seen nobody to help me. So I don't know how I'm gonna get this hood off if nobody shows up. Did you lose your lizard again? Daisy had caught her little blue-tailed lizard this morning and had been playing with it, and I guess it had run back under there. So she's not very happy about it, I guess. You want to help me set a hood off? I don't think you can pick it up, baby. Well, let's go try. Well, nobody still showed up to help me take this hood off. This thing weighs like 200 pounds and it's 7 foot long, so it's about impossible to get off by yourself. Hard with 2 people, easy with 3. But I've got everything unhooked. The motor is literally just sitting here on the balancer on the cross member and on the block of wood on the steering linkage. Everything that's attached to the car is loose, so it's ready to literally come straight up out once the hood comes off. But it sure is a hot one today. I'm going to try to make some phone calls, see if I can't find somebody to help me. Because we all know poor little Daisy, even though she would help, she's not able to. Well, the hood's off. Dad come by and help me get the hood off, set the motor out of it. So I didn't video none of that stuff, but let me flip it around and I'll show you where I'm at. So we got a big old gaping hole where the motor was. I'm going to weld that cross member back in there since I never did end up fixing it. So I'm going to fix it again permanently there. The hood's all propped up here. Some wood bees have been cutting some holes in the rafters up top, and the motor's sitting over here. I pulled it out with everything attached to it, put it on this little wooden cart with a thick piece of plywood on it, so that should be good, and got it strapped down. So I'm gonna cover it back up with that towel, set it to the side for now. So I brought that cross member piece I cut out, so I'm gonna get it cleaned up, get it welded back between down there. I've done test fitted it. It fits just as good as it did when I cut it out. So let me show you what we're going to put in it. So Dad had this at his house, and we tried to sell it several times, but what we have here is a 73 Cobra Jet Cleveland block, so it's 4-bolt main with a 70 model rotating assembly and 70 model 4-valve closed chambered heads on it. It has a crane solid roller camshaft in it, an old Edelbrock torquer intake. It's got some roller tip rockers and Ford racing valve cover stuff. It's really not nothing real special. Obviously a double roller timing chain, that kind of good stuff, but it seems like a viable option considering what I've had go on. He brought me a flywheel and my extra set of frame mounts out of my 71 Torino. And some other stuff to kind of go with it that we're missing. So basically a major power downgrade. I've never really thought highly of a Cleveland. They're probably my least favorite of any Ford motor platform up until your newer stuff. But this car was a factory 351 Cleveland car, so might as well go ahead and put it in it. At least can run the motor and see how it does with 4-speed behind it. I ordered some motor mounts and some headers and stuff from Summit Racing. They should be here sometime today. So maybe tomorrow I can get the motor set in it. But the only thing I don't have at this point, other than maybe some little things like belts and fluids and stuff, would be a clutch. Now, Ram is going to make the clutch that come part out of 6-cylinder good. They're going to make that situation good, but I got to send it back to them, and there's absolutely no way I can probably get that back in a week. To even pull this magic trick off, this car's got to run by next weekend. So, got 7 days and less than 20 days away from the NoName Nationals at this point, so I need to be at the track this coming, well, not this coming Tuesday, but at least the Tuesday after, and at least get some test passes in. And whatever it's going to run, that's what it's going to run. I don't expect the world. I would say it probably would run about the same as what 6-cylinder did with automatic. But it's definitely going to be a torque downgrade and definitely a power downgrade. So let me get back busy, see if I can get this cross member welded in here and get it cleaned up and painted. And I got some other things I can do to the car in the meantime. I'm going to have to bring my 411 gear back and put it in the car. I got some parking brake stuff I need to fix that I can do. It will save me some time to do it now while we have some downtime, but at least we got a plan to go forward at this point. Well, got that cross member all welded back in. I was having some problems with the welder. Let my buddy's son hook this thing up, and he had it all hooked up wrong, and somehow the regulator got damaged, so it wasn't feeding gas to the lead. And he had the positive on the ground and the trigger on the negative, and yeah, it wasn't welding all that great. So I got all that straightened out, got that welded in there. So let's move on to the next thing. So in hindsight, the changes are going to be minor. As far as car goes, I got to get some motor mounts in there. And I've got them up here in the vise. I'm going to wire brush them off, get some paint on them, get them bolted back in the car. And then we'll be pretty much good until I start getting some more parts in. Then we can start putting the motor in it. But there is some stuff that's got to be done to the motor beforehand. The valves are not adjusted on it. They were all backed off. It is a solid roller, so I'll have to go in there and adjust it, put some valve cover gaskets on it. And there's a little pulley situation that I got to straighten out too. Other than that, just a bunch of little stuff that's got to happen in a real short time to make it happen. Daisy's still hanging out. She says the concrete floor is cooler than outside today. It's like 100 and something degrees, or at least it feels like it. So she's just hanging out with me. We'll get those motor mount stands painted on top and bottom. Daisy's out here looking for another lizard to get after. So when these dry out, we'll get them bolted in the car. And we can start back on going forward from there. Yeah, maybe this will help somebody out in the future. I've got these stuck up on there. I've not tightened them down yet. But these motor mounts have a flat side. And then they have a side that bumps out. The bump out on these cars goes towards the back. The flat goes towards the front. As you can see on their 6-cylinder mounts, that's exactly how they were. Minus where I'd welded plates to them. Them are the factory Cleveland mounts that were in this car before, when I've had various small blocks in it and various big blocks and the 6-cylinder in it too. So these are just an unmodified set. So let me get them tightened up. So since the next thing I need to fix, since I can't put the motor in it yet, I'm going to go ahead and address some of these other issues that I need to fix, like the parking brake. When they painted this car, they had cut my parking brake cable for whatever reason when they had it apart. I don't know if you've ever tried to find one for a 70 or 71 Torino, but they're very hard to find now. And this is like the world's longest parking brake cable on the passenger side. It actually loops all the way to the front of the car under transmission and then back to the driver's side. Good news is, if you're looking for one or any parking brake cables for a 70 or 71 Torino, Rock Auto has them in stock. Their listings are correct, so you can count on that. I don't have the part number for the cable, but I'll flip it around and show you, and I'll show you where I'm at and what I'm going to do. So I got my new cable. It's here on the floor. As you can see, the cable itself's got the sheath is short. This is your drum side, and this is the side that runs all the way up under the car, you know, like this old one hanging down, and connects over there to that one. So it didn't come with a connector piece, so I'll have to rob that off the parts car outside. But for now, I need to get this brake shoe off, take all these springs off. We're going to get to this arm back here, where I can unclip the parking brake cable from it, and I'll show you how to get all that stuff out. So it's going to be hard for me to video or set this up anywhere, but pretty much drum brake tool like this. You're going to go in here, you're just going to pop these springs loose. Use a pair of side cutters or dikes to pull this spring back, and then your self-adjuster arm will come off. From there, I'm going to use this fancy tool right here. I'm going to go in here, hold this, twist, and it'll come off. So let me grab some more tools, and I'll be back. And I know this is probably shaded and hard to see here, but I can't hold the camera and release this bottom spring. But you literally just pull it back towards this adjuster, and then this little cable and the self-adjuster bracket will come off. I never understood why people are so scared of drum brakes. Literally, this was the car I learned to do drum brakes on. Dad showed me how to do one side. The other side, you take it apart, lay it on the ground, and I put it together. And if I didn't put it together right, he took it back apart. I done it again. So drum brakes are not scary. They're not fiddly. They're actually pretty darn simple. As long as you don't start dropping everything as you go together or start taking it apart. But self-adjuster down there at the bottom. And that leaves us at this point right here. And to release that spring from the parking brake arm, I'm just going to take a pair of side cutters, hold the spring back, and then we got our shoe off with the arm released. The hard part is getting the parking brake cable out of the backing plate. It's got some spring tabs in there. Sometimes you can go in there with a screwdriver and push all them tabs and wiggle and twist and push on the little spring tabs. I'll flip it around and show them to you. As you can see up in there, we get little spring tabs that stick out, and that's what holds this into this backing plate. So they make tools that slide on here and compress those, but I do not have one and never had one. I'll just go in here with a flathead screwdriver and push them tabs down one at a time using this shoe as leverage, and I'll twist and work it out. I won't be able to show you all that because I can't hold the camera and do it at the same time, and there's not really anywhere for me to, sit this thing where you can see. And sometimes it might fight you, and you might have to go the route that I did and have to take all the shoes off, which isn't a huge deal. But to insert your new parking brake cable, this thing just literally goes in here and it'll push in. Just like that. So now we're ready to put the brake shoes back on it, and we can start hooking up the rest of this mess. And I can tell you one thing, it is miserable hot today. It's like 200 degrees in the shop. So, get my shoes here ready. Push my pin. So pretty much when you put your brake shoes back on, it's going to be reverse of, removal. I always start with the back shoe, and that's the one with the parking brake. And then from there, you'll hang your front shoe on just like you did your back one. With your little pin and your little cups. Where you can drop everything on the floor. I know this stuff's impossible to see, but I've seen very many people intimidated by brake shoes. They're not scary. They could be scary. You just gotta get in here and do them. If you don't try, you'll never learn. You get all screwed up and you don't know which side you're on or what you're doing. It's just mirror images. So this will be a mirror image of the other side. So there's not a whole lot you can screw up here. Worst case, you take a picture of it and you take it apart, and then you got a guide to put it back together. You just can't let this stuff intimidate you and make you scared to even try. But just like that, guys, it's back together. Fun fact, these are the same shoes I put on this car when I was 13 years old. I've had them off a couple times, but they've never been replaced. So I'm going to leave the drum off of it because, I want to change the gear again back to the 411, so we can get back to hooking our parking brake cable and stuff up. So this is actually not a bad parking brake cable to change. It literally goes up here in this bracket right here. It's got a clip that holds it on. And poof, the cable's in, other than running this big old long piece. But once that cable's clipped in, it runs up here to this little hook right here. It's going to go through. You'll have to take this nut off. It goes through here, kind of like this. But on the bottom side of the stud, it's going to loop around and come back here and connect up here. And there's a little sleeve that goes in between these two balls. So I'm going to wait to hook this up until I get the motor and transmission back in the car. I'm just going to tuck this cable up, kind of like they had it before. I thought I might be able to go ahead and put it in there, but it looks like it might interfere with putting the transmission in separately. And right now that's the plan. I'm going to put the motor in, bell housing on it. I'm going to put the transmission in last. So can't have that cable in the way. But I do need to go out here and rob that little connector piece off the parts car. So I'll do that and then I'll be back. And I got our little connector piece off the parts car. It literally will go in there like this. This little ball passes through the center like that right there. And our cable will connect to the other side. So I'll put this up on my toolbox where I won't lose it until I can get the motor and transmission back in and get it connected to that cable. Almost got the center section out. Gear oil still looks good in it, so I'm gonna let that drain a few minutes and then I'll huff this big old heavy pig out of here. So axles come out pretty easy, which I assume they would. It's not been too long since I put that 325 gear back in it, so we get this out of there and then hopefully tomorrow we can change it to that 411 again. And I got the center section pulled out. I got some towels shoved under it, let that gear oil weep off of it. Yes, I know it's rusty right here. That is a factory gear out of a 69 model Ford truck that I'd put in this car a long, long time ago. It was 325 gear. I'd put the 411 in it later on when I put the big block in it. So when I come back tomorrow, we'll swap this out for that 411. See if we can't get that back in the car down there. So guys, at this point, it's about 7 o'clock at night and I've had a full day of this. So I'm going to go to the house and hopefully rest the rest of the afternoon. I'll grab my 411 gear, come back in the morning. We'll set this rear end up, get the rear end of the car put back together. And we'll see what else we can get into from there. Well, it's the next day. I brought my 411 gear to get this thing set up. So let me flip it around. So I brought my Ford 411 gear. Let's see, it's got a, barely see it, D2 part number here. This is a 411 gear, factory Ford gear, and this one is a 325. My 411 gear had a broken ring gear bolt. and it's been like that for a long time, and I'd been running at -1. So I come in here this morning, drilled the center out, tapped in a Torx bit, heated it up with torch, and backed this thing out. Got this roughly cleaned up enough I can handle it and, not get covered with this mess. So let's set this rear gear back up. So this is another area that intimidates a bunch of people. A Ford 9-inch rear end is one of the more simple ones to set up. So we'll start by pulling these 1/2-inch bolts and lock tabs off. Now these lock tabs keep this carrier adjuster in place. I've never seen one come loose, but it's always a good idea to have. Next thing is going to be carrier bearing cap. These torque like 65 feet. They should come loose fairly easy. You do not want to get these mixed up from side to side. They are machined with the case and threaded with the case, so if you get them mixed up side to side, you will have issues. So if you don't have a spanner wrench, a pair of these 90-degree needle nose right here work pretty well too. They'll get you by in a pinch, and then you can get your carrier out. So keep your adjusters and your bearing races to each side. I'm going to set this to the side for now. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove my pinion yoke before I pull the pinion support loose. And your pinion nuts on a small pinion is 1 1/16 inch. Set the pinion nut to the side. And your pinion support comes off. These are 9 1/16. And usually they pop apart pretty easy, but sometimes they don't. You may have to take something like a small chisel and tap upward on it. You don't want to get too wild or you'll damage your shim, which we're going to reuse. So at that point, the center section is tore down. So So I got my 411 ring gear here, and what I like to do, I put a little Loctite on these bolts. That way when I put them in there, you don't have to worry about them backing out. And that's why I had to get the bigger impact, get these out, because they were Loctited in. Just gonna put a little blue on it this time because I'm out of red. This ring gear does press up on here. The easiest way I found to do it is I'm going to start 4 ring gear bolts. About 90 degrees from each other here. And I'll use something like this 3/8 impact, and I'll just pull them down. And that'll draw that ring gear back on to your carrier. This is a lightweight mini spool, so it's a little bit different than what you might see in an open carrier. The hard part will be torquing these, because I'll have to chuck this up in the vise without damaging anything, and then I'll be able to torque this stuff. But let me get these torqued and I'll be back. Well, I had to move y'all so I could get this in the vise where I could get these torqued down. So used my 3/8 torque wrench here, torque these 65. I'm gonna set my carrier back to the side. Now it's time to start on our pinion support. Now sometimes these yokes can be a bear to get off, especially if you RTV them like I do around the splines, keep them weak and fluid. So I'll have to take a long flat-ended punch and put it in the center in here, and I'll tap this out in the vise that y'all are sitting on. So I won't be able to show that process, but let me get this pinion yoke off here, and then our pinion will just slide right out. And once you get that apart, you'll have something like this. I'll RTV the splines in here, and what generally happens is that RTV grabs a hold of these splines, makes this thing quite the bear to get apart. So I'll just take a flat-ended punch like that, the center of our pinion up here, and tap it out. There's no reason, if you're just doing a gear change like this, to change this pinion seal if it's not leaking, nor remove the outer bearing. So you're going to be left with this, and you're going to have a crush sleeve or solid spacer, and you're going to have a bearing. Well, our other pinion does not have the bearing on it because I swapped it to this one last time. So I'm going to have to press this bearing off. Another thing you can also do, I've done it this way too, is take a punch and work this off the pinion. Because once you get up past about this spot right here, this thing just slide off with your hands. I've done them both ways. Other one's using a press over here and a bearing splitter. So let me get to that, and let me get this bearing off. Well, this one come off pretty easy, probably because it's been pressed on off a few times, but I just used this chisel and my hammer. And a wooden table so it wouldn't scar the pinion up. Get the bearing off on 9-inch Ford. You're not going to have a shim behind the bearing. All your shimming goes behind your pinion support. And just like that, as you can see, I just tapped it down there with a punch and a small chisel. And we are fully seated. Yeah, I know. There's specialty tools for all this stuff, but you know, you do it in your backyard, this is how you do it. I've had good luck doing it like this throughout the years. And as long as you're careful, you won't tear nothing up. So now we're ready to put the pinion support back together. And we can get to the part that scares most people, is setting this rear end up. And don't forget, either your crush ring or your solid spacer will top that pinion bearing. So I put a little RTV around my splines again, a little Loctite on the nut. Especially if you reuse old crush sleeve, you just want to make sure this is tight and you don't have no play. This is where I'm going to vary from things like torque specs. I'm going to tighten this thing down until it spins about like it did when I took it apart, and make sure I don't have no play in our bearings. But pretty much when you get down to where your solid spacer is, your crush ring, your crush spacer, that nut's going to stop hard. So you want to just make sure everything is good and tight at that point without crushing that ring anymore. Especially considering what we're doing, we're not setting up a noose, so we don't have to worry about crushing the crush ring or checking everything with solid spacer. So this stuff can be either as hard as you make it or as easy as you make it. But this is what I've done several times over the years on this car, and it works well every time. I've probably built about 200 rear ends and never had an issue or a noise problem out of one. So I got all this cleaned up and we'll set it to the side. Our carrier is going to come back right here. You just want to make sure all this stuff is reasonably clean. You want to put your pinion shim, your pinion support shim back in. It's going to go like that. There is an O-ring around your pinion support. If you don't have a new one, I have took and lightly coated this with RTV in here, and you can put it together. An 8 and 9-inch Ford's about the only ones you can get away with doing this like this. The ones that your carrier's not removable, they're a little more finicky, and there's a lot of shimming and a lot of measuring involved. So you got your shim. Now this is a one-way only bolt pattern, kind of like a flywheel. So I got it in there. It should just push straight down just like that. And at this point, I'm going to tighten my pinion support bearing bolts. Yes. You just want to make sure once you install it, everything rotates free. A big thing on 9-inch Ford, and I'll show you this, is where you need to watch for breakage at, especially on a standard case like this. I'll bring y'all in and show you. A standard case, they are known on higher power cars, they break right in here. As you can see, this one's been shaved down, and that is not a crack, it is a scratch. With over a 370 gear in these, you have to shave this down for your ring gear on your 411 or higher gear. But these things, they'll crack right up this pinion support bearing, straight up this case. And once that does, that's when you start getting all this other stuff breaking and coming apart. You want to make sure this bearing back here is good. I've recently replaced that one, so we're good there. And we're ready to put this thing back together. Well, you got your carrier. You're going to need your bearing races for each side and your adjusters. So I like to set all this stuff up in there kind of together, and that will keep this carrier from sliding everywhere. So we'll put your caps back on. We're not going to tighten them down. We're just going to get them on here as they go. Your big rib will always go to the inside. It's been a minute since I've had this apart. I'm going to run these caps down, but I'm not going to tighten them. I'm just going to run them down until I start to see they have a little pressure on them. But I'm not going to tighten them down. So at this point, you're going to set the backlash. And that's pretty wide right there. Now, you could surely take a dial indicator and measure your backlash. I'm showing you how to do this in your backyard pretty much. So you're going to tighten one side while you loosen the other side by the same amount. On a shim type rear end, you're going to add shims to the side you want to tighten and take them away from the other side. I'm just going to use these needle nose to kind of ease up on it. And just use this to turn my adjusters. We're getting pretty close. And this is where you don't want to tighten this down, your caps down, because you won't be able to turn these. But you want to set it where you just barely, you can hear it barely ring right there. Bring it all in. But you can watch this ring gear. Let me see if I can get this camera steady. Barely hear it ring right there. And that's, I say ring, it just, the slack in it. So at this point, we should be pretty good. And you may have to go back in here and loosen this up a little bit, because when you torque these caps down, you may find out you have no play at all. So if you go in that situation, you want to start turning these about a quarter turn at a time in opposite directions and move that pinion back the other way. But ultimately, with everything torqued down tight, you want to end up about in the same place where we were. These torqued to 65 foot-pounds. I'm at the point where they're tight now. I'm going to torque these down, and then I'm going to put my lock tabs back in here. They're going to go in here just whatever bowl hole they reach. I say bowl hole, but spanner nut hole. This is easier with the tool, but these work just fine. So let me get those torqued down. And once you get them torqued down, you want to make sure your pinions turn smoothly. You want to make sure you have just a little backlash. 3-play. We're going to put your lock adjusters in here, adjuster locks. Tighten them down, and then you're ready to go back in the car. And I'm sure I'll probably get somebody that says, oh, you can't do this way, and this is wrong. You didn't check the pattern. So I'm going to take a little bit of anti-seize here, since I don't have no pattern checking grease or paint. And I'm just going to paint 4 teeth here with it. I'll have to go back and clean it out with some brake cleaner, but I'm going to roll this right here. And what you want to do, you want to roll this, put a load on that pinion. And you want to come in here and you can see how your pattern sets. So you can see our pattern is right in the middle, and it's trending right in the middle up here. You can see where it transferred up here. You can see where it's right in the middle on the back side. So right there, all done with simple tools on the bench. No special stuff needed. Everything don't have to be rocket science. Pattern looks good. I'm sure it'll be quiet because I've run this gear in this car before. Set it up just like that. Set the 325 up just like that. Like I said, I've done a bunch of them. Never had an issue. You pretty much just cover your bases like I did. And if you're worried, check your pattern. If you got screwed up, you may have to tighten your backlash up a little more. You may have to change pinion depth shim. But usually when you're putting a factory gear in a factory carrier, it's going to set up pretty much just like it did when it came out of the other one. Same way with 8.8 Ford rear ends. I've literally pulled them out of junkyard rear ends, kept side shims together for carrier. Don't ever take the pinion shim off of it. Drop it right in another 8.8 case, and generally they're fine. The pattern checks out good too, just like that. So guys, at this point, this video is probably getting pretty long for my phone. So I'm going to slap this carrier back in there and the axles back in it. It's pretty much how I tore it down before, just reverse assembly. And I'll be back a little later on. Once you get this stuff buttoned up, we'll talk about some more things. All right, I'm going to pop back in kind of preemptively. Another thing you don't forget on 9-inch Ford, you got these copper washers that seal your nuts off. Go to Harbor Freight, pick you up one of these for like $4.99. It's got exactly 10 of the 7/16 copper washers. That's enough to do your 9-inch and gives you some left over for other projects. Or if you do a bunch of brake stuff, brake line sealing washers are about the right size too. Just figured that might help somebody. I got the rear end stuff all back together, so that's good down there. So need to start pulling this thing apart a little bit and checking some things out. Daisy's sitting here chilling out for the day, aren't you? So one thing I do need to do, I need to adjust the valves, and I need to see what kind of distributor gear was on the camshaft down there. This is an old Crane solid roller, and Crane's out of business now, so can't just call them up and see what gear I need. So it could have a billet steel core, or it could be an iron gear that's pressed on the camshaft. So it looks kind of like an iron gear down in there, but I'm not real sure. So I need to get the plugs out of this thing, see if we can't get these valves adjusted. And all right, I went in here and I put a little oil down in these rocker arms. This motor has never been primed, it's never been fired since it was assembled. So we also never adjust the rockers. So what I'm going to do, got the exhaust valve down. They're run down enough you can tell what valve opens when. So these valves set to 22 thousandths. So it's going to take my 22 thousandths filler gauge, get it in here where it rolls somewhat snugly. I'm just going to go in here and tighten down our poly lock. I'm going to roll the motor over till the intake valve is open. Till it's open. I'm going to check the exhaust. And we'll run it down until we got a nice little snug 22 thousandths. I'm going to repeat this process all the way down. Well, I went ahead and just put oil in it because I figured all this spinning the motor over, I better prime it since it sat so long. That's just with the hand drill. So looks like we're going to have plenty of oil pressure. And that's it, guys. We're at the end of this video. I got the valves adjusted. I've got the valve covers just stepped back on now. I'm going to get some longer valve cover bolts because of the gaskets. I really don't like those rocker arms, so that's something I think I may address before. I've still got enough time I can make an order from Summit and actually get stuff in time. Considering usually if it's in stock in McDonough, Georgia, I can usually have it within a day or two. I got a set of headers ordered, a set of motor mounts ordered. I've still got to get a clutch. I got to decide what I'm putting behind this motor. So we're cutting it real close, and we will be cutting it down to the wire for NoName Nationals. I've got to get this in the car. I've got to get it running. I got to get sorted out, and we got to get to the track before we take off and head to Missouri. So, yeah, that's what I say. But this is about the only option. I could fix a 6-cylinder, and I'm going to fix a 6-cylinder. It's just not going to be right now. I'm looking at a very heavy-duty clutch fret setup, and more than likely I'll end up putting in that 66 Mustang that I bought, and maybe just build a purpose-built drag car out of it. But so that said, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button because it does help the channel to grow, helps me bring you more content like this, helps me knock a little labor hours off of that 65 Mustang hack job. That thing's finally starting to come around. If you haven't checked out that series, check it out. If you are a subscriber, I greatly appreciate you guys. So until the next video, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.